Welcome everyone to our next AU Core Technical Design Group meeting. As we do these on fortnightly on Thursdays, I'll be chairing this one. My name is Danielle Tavares-Rickson. I'm the Sparked Fire Lead, and our scribe for today is Olivia. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we all gather today, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. Agenda for today um, is all about, I guess, to a degree, wrapping up AU Core R2 and talking about getting started on our next release. So we'll go through the usual business and updates. We then have a placeholder that was requested by Ruben in our last call. Ruben, is that... Oh, yeah, please go, Ruben.
Yeah, sorry, I sent you a message on Slack this morning, Danielle, that we won't
Oh,
need that placeholder today. Sorry.
no, that's okay. I missed that one. Apologies. Yep. Okay,
No,
so not a problem. Then we'll move into a ballot update and report back on the common items that were voted on at the firework group that we ran through to socialize in our last call, but we didn't vote on them in AU call. We took those to the firework group because each of these items impacted at least 3 different HL7 AU specifications. Um, we then have a change request. This is not a ballot item, but it is an editorial change request to consider. Um, and then we'll talk about the wrap up of AU Core R2, next steps, like how do we get from here to publication, and talk about AU Core R3 and do a little bit of immediate, like what's next, what's coming up in the next few weeks. Are there any other items that people would like to put on the agenda for today? All right, not hearing any. We'll go through this agenda at the moment. So we'll go into usual business. The minutes were sent round for review, so I'll bring those up. Um, that might actually be a little small. That might be better. Okay, so the minutes have the attendees. We've got our recording and the slides, the transcript and chat log. We have the decisions that were made with some of the updates, including the report back from the Pittsburgh meeting from HL7 International. And we made, I think, our final kind of ballot comments, ballot dispositions for us. And that is in here. We had a long discussion, which has been captured quite well here. So these have been sent round. Does anyone need any more time to review these before we look to approve them? All right, not hearing any then. Who would like to motion to approve the minutes?
David McKillop.
Thank you, David. Who would like to second?
I can
I will
second that.
second this. Oh,
You go, Dish.
oh, it's okay.
Well, we'll take
Yeah.
Dushi just as the second then. Any other comments or questions before we move to a vote? Okay, I'll now launch that electronic poll for vote. Please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain for approving the minutes of the last meeting. And if you can't vote, then you can, like using the electronic poll, you can put a +1 for affirmative, negative, or abstain in the chat. And if you can't see either the electronic vote and don't have access to the chat, then you can say your name and +1 affirmative, negative, or abstain. All right. That looks like we've basically got our votes in. So I'm just going to end the poll. Okay, I'm going to share the results and I'll just double check. Landon, were you able to... Okay, you've put that in the chat. Thank you. So that's 12 affirmative, 0 negative and 9 abstains. The motion carries. We have approved those minutes. Thank you. Okay, back to where we were. Updates and news. So in terms of our upstream specification that we depend on, which is AU base, that's now gone through almost all of its reconciliation. So there's only 3 items that they're still to vote on. They don't impact AU Core. They are around terminology for communication request. So that is something that e-requesting would be impacted by, but Core isn't. So all of the things that could materially change Core that could be voted on have been. And we have finished our ballot reconciliation for AU Core. So a withdrawal was announced. That's part of the ballot process. And I'll just go to the announcement here on Zulip. And I think it came round to an email to all balloters. This is the closing the loop part of ballot voting. So for those people who voted in ballot and they voted on specific pieces of feedback to say that I'd like you to consider this, we've gone through as a technical design group and deliberated on how that should change and made some decisions on whether or not things would change, and if they are going to, what changes should be made. And once we've done that, now we've gone through the list, it comes out to the ballot voters to say, please consider withdrawing your ballot vote to indicate that you accept the resolution of those issues. And that just closes that loop on whether or not the voter is satisfied with the resolution. So that's out there. There's also instructions on how you do that in Jira if you did submit a ballot vote. And if you've got any issues, you can contact Brett using that particular email address. Heath.
Can I just confirm that we don't have to withdraw the ones that we've voted affirmative on?
You do not have to withdraw the ones you voted affirmative on. That's correct. I think it would be nice to indicate whether or not you're happy with it, but it doesn't materially change the outcome of whether or not we pass. If we a specification needs to, let me just get to that slide that we've been, oh, this one. In order to actually have approval to publish out of a ballot, you need to meet the pass criteria. And that looks at the negative and affirmative votes. There were 12, and I think there still are today. I checked that this morning. 12 negative votes on AU Core. So this would be the opportunity for the people who voted on a particular issue to say that, no, I think this is sufficient to block publication of AU Core, to indicate whether or not they are satisfied and they now are happy to be affirmative on the publication of AU Core R2. And if you were already affirmative, it doesn't change your overall vote. Any other questions on withdrawing or the voting? All right, let's go back to updates. Okay. One of the things we're working through at the moment is progressing towards having a normative snapshot for the December Connectathon so we can test out the baseline of the changes that we've agreed. I'll talk with this in a bit more detail later on, but I can say, and great work from the IG editing team, thanks Dushi, and thanks also Brett for your help and others, that we have 100% of the normative AU Core issues now have been applied. There are some outstanding changes to be applied in AU base. That would be inherited by AU Core, though they don't impact, I think, a must support element in AU Core, but they would still, if there are any issues, be inherited by us. and that impacts the patient practitioner related person and medication profile. That stuff is underway. So that should be all ready to go, I hope, for the December Connectathon snapshot. Last update, there was the EOI open for the AU Core R3 backlog pitches from the community. With that EOI closed, there were 8 submissions in total, and that's been narrowed to 7. 7 will be pitched at the November 13 TDG Day in Canberra, and notifications gone out to people that that's been accepted, and they can put together, if they want to, a series of slides or some other kind of material to pitch. That's it for the updates and news, I think, unless there's anything else from the HL7AU representatives on the call. All right, let's go to actions. So let me just look at who's on the line, because I'm not sure if Marvin is on the call. No, Marvin's not here today, so we'll hold that over to the next call. Then there's ones are with Tim to engage around testing for AU Core Healthcare Service. I think, Ricardo, you were going to speak to that today.
Yeah, yep. So look, the current plan is we're planning on taking an agency fire AG that we're developing at the moment, which contains the healthcare service profile to that Connectathon for testing. So that's the current plan in terms of getting something of an endpoint available for people to connect to, and hopefully test this profile and increase the coverage a little bit more.
Okay, so should we consider those actions complete now?
I'm happy with that. So just look on the assumption that yeah we'll be taking that IG to the Connectathon. So yeah, I'm happy for them to be closed.
Okay.
Yeah, on the back of this update. Yeah.
The next one is on Brett and I, and that is still open. We're still debating that one. So that's in progress, but it's not come to a conclusion yet. The next item was really around having a ballot filter. I think that was completed, Brett. I think you provided the ballot filter for AU Core.
Yeah, I think so. I want to do a better job, but for now, yes.
Okay, so we can consider that one complete.
Cool.
The next one, which doesn't have a bullet point, is something that I've let drop, and I need to send an email to you, Craig. Apologies for not getting on top of that. Then there's one around again, a tooling. Actually, that's the same thing. That's just a repetition here. And the last one, we have an outstanding action from a while ago, Brett, where you were going to consider putting together a proposal for how we deal with must support on observation components. Is that still something that you wanted to undertake, or should we just close that action?
I think, can we leave that one open? I think
Okay.
I still want to do that, but I've not done it yet.
Okay. We'll track that through then.
Yeah.
All right, that's that for the actions. I wanted to draw people's attention to a new Zulip EOI for a Connectathon breakout for this December's Connectathon. Dushi, did you want to just give a little bit of an overview?
Yes, sure. So this breakout, we ran this breakout in September at the Brisbane Connectathon, and it was really well attended. We were lucky enough to have Graham there. So Graham answered the questions, and he provided some updates on tooling changes that are coming. So it was really helpful to have him there. So we'd like to run this session again in December, and it's really for anyone working on fire IGs. So if you're building your own IG, for example, building an IG that implements patient summary, and you're trying to author something, or you need some information, or just more on how something works or how to make something happen in the IG. Hopefully we can help with that. So post your questions in the Zulip chat now, and we'll include it in the breakout. And I think also the thing that I haven't mentioned in Zulip, but anyone who's willing to help run the breakout and support others that are building IGs, let us know again, either by posting in Zulip or just contact us directly. So that's all I've got to
Okay,
say.
thanks. Thanks, Dushi. Can you pop the link to that EOI so that people, yep, excellent, in the chat. Fantastic. And we'll add that into the minutes as well. Which brings us to, I guess, a reminder here. As far as I know, but I did only check, I checked Monday, there are still tickets available, but only a few left for the December Melbourne Connectathon. So if you are planning to go, you need to get in pretty quick smart for those tickets. Similar situation on the CDG TDG day for what's coming up in Canberra in November 12 and 13. I think there's maybe 10 tickets left on the AU Core TDG day. I'm not actually sure if there are any tickets left in the CDG day, but you can go on the wait list. Which if you have a ticket and you're unable to attend, please let sparked at csiro.au know, and probably the same on the Connectathon. There will probably be a wait list like there is every year, and I'll probably actually we might actually make an announcement on how to give up your ticket if it turns out you can't attend on the day, and let other people pick that up. We'll go into a bit more of a detailed agenda later on in what's coming up next, because this is the next time we're going to meet, actually, is the face-to-face after this call. But let me go into ballot update. So, well done, everyone. We have completed ballot reconciliation. We've done that within the time that we wanted to, which was pretty amazing. So we're now in progress around publication. And while the withdrawal is out, it doesn't impact our approval status. We've met the criteria for publication. So here's where we are. We have 19 JIRA issues overall. Out of those, all of them have been triaged. All of them we've made decisions on. And of those where we've made a decision to change, which is 8, 7 of those have already been applied, and they're all the normative ones. There's one remaining that is about creating a new page, a guide, an informative page for AU Core that won't be complete by the time the December Connectathon comes around. So I'm going to stop showing you this widget in every single meeting, and we'll just bring it back when we are actually done. We know what the scope was, but we can move on. Let me give you just a quick report back on the common issues. So if you were with us in the last call and you were able to stay till the end, we had a good discussion on both of these items, more around the diagnostic result item. And that's been voted on. And so we are going to make a change in AU Core. The change that we will make in AU Core has already been applied. I'll go to that now. That's patient summary. And we have changed diagnostic result observation. What the agreement was that we made in both when we socialized this in last call, and that was accepted by the firework group in the common call, we've agreed to make a change to has member. So it now makes reference to the AU-based diagnostic imaging result profile, which was determined to basically be a mistake that it got taken out in AU Core when we did a bit of scope pruning in early AU Core R1. And so that is now in, and that will therefore be available for testing. So if we can see if there are any unintended consequences. I can't imagine there would be, but that's why we test. So that one's applied. This one, which was a suggestion to change the diagrams, which is, oops, looking at, oh, actually, is it this? Yeah, this diagram was a suggesting to change this diagram that was not persuasive, essentially, and so no change will be made across the HL7 AUIGs. That's the summary of those two items. And that brings us to, well, our completion of our ballot reconciliation. But wait, we have more. So there was this one submitted that is an editorial item that, while not voted on in ballot, could be considered because it is editorial and doesn't substantively change the specification. So we can also determine whether or not we want to make this change. I'll also take that opportunity to say, if you spot any errors, technical corrections, we are always going to fix those. So please, if you spot a defect or something you think is an error, raise them. We're always on the lookout for those to make sure that we can get that fixed. And that would still go into AU Core R2. But I'll bring it to this particular topic, and I think I'll just go to that one now. So, and who do we have Richard on the line? Because I think this was raised by Richard.
Richard's on leave at the moment.
Ah, that's right. Yep. So then I think, Dushi, you were going to speak to this one. Did you want to?
Yeah, I can provide an overview of what the issue is about and yeah, speak more to it.
And did you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll grab the
Okay.
screen now. So let me know if you can see it, if you can see the Jira issue.
It's a bit small.
Okay, I'll make it bigger. Oops. Is this better?
Yeah, I can deal with that. Anyone else need it any bigger?
Let's make it a notch bigger.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, all right. So this issue was raised on AU Core PractitionerRole profile, where we have an identifier slice for medicareProvider number, which has the default identifier short description, and the issue is suggesting overwriting that short description with the specific short for the medicareProvider number. So I'll go to the profile to show everyone where this is. I'll make this bigger. Oops. Is that okay for everyone?
Maybe one more zoom.
One more. Oops.
Yep,
Okay.
that's good.
All right. All right. So that's PractitionerRole profile. This is the slice in question. So we have an identifier slice for medicareProvider number. We see the slice name medicareProvider. The data type is constrained to a data type profile defined in AU base. And it has this short description that's inherited from the identifier element short description. So it says business identifiers that are specific to a role location, which is still true for this identifier type, but it is generic. So if we navigate to the identifier data type profile for Medicare provider number, the short description is Medicare provider number in here. So the JIRA that Richard's raised is asking whether we should replace the inherited short on the slice in practitioner role profile, this one here, with the data type short from base. So the AU Core slice would read Medicare provider number instead of business identifiers that are specific to a role or location. And I think the idea behind this is that where slice constrains its data type to a single identified profile, to use that profile short. I think I'll just point out that even though this was raised on the practitioner role profile, we have other profiles in AU Core that slice identifier and apply specific data types to those slices. So for example, we have AU Core patient that has slices for IHI, DVA number, and Medicare card number. So if we did this, we would want to apply it consistently to all profiles in AU Core, and at this stage, this would be a manual change. If we go back to JIRA ticket, there was a question or some short conversation about whether we should get tooling to do this for us. And Richard's raised a question in Zulip. The link's available from the JIRA ticket, but I'll go to the Zulip chat. Okay, make that slide, slightly bigger. So Richard raised this question in Zulip more broadly to ask whether the IG tooling should do this for us, whether the IG tooling should automate this. And the general consensus was no. As the data type profile describes the identifier itself, it doesn't describe the usage context in a given element, and copying this text from the data type profile onto the element where the identifier is used doesn't really improve clarity, as the meaning depends on where the identifier is used. So there was an example given, I think, of a Medicare card number profile that when used on patient and patient as a patient identifier, it means patient identity for administrative matching. But when the same data type profile is used on coverage identifier, it actually identifies the insurance coverage. So it's the same identifier profile, but different context. Another reason for not really agreeing to this change was that this would make it harder for IG editors to manage and debug downstream IGs. So for example, we have AU base, and then we have AU Core deriving from AU base, and AU patient summary derives from AU Core. So if we wanted to make some downstream changes, managing those changes in a way that doesn't override this text insertion from the AU based definition would become hard. And yeah, so in general, it was agreed that where extra explanation is useful, it should really be done manually, added manually by IG editors for that specific context, rather than duplicating by tooling. So if we go back to the profile, I think for all of these reasons, the proposed disposition for this change is not persuasive. The current short that we have in the profile is correct, and it does apply to all identifier slices. We have a slice name that's already specific. Right? We also have the data type that's typed to AU Medicare provider number. It hyperlinks to AU Medicare provider number in AU base. So I don't think there is really any confusion about it. This is AU Medicare provider number as defined by this profile. So making the manual change to override a short to add Medicare provider number text from AU base doesn't really add much value here. I'll also point out that we already include guidance, profile-specific implementation guidance that direct readers to the identifier profile guidance in AU base on how specifically to implement this identifier type. So this AU-based profile that we reference here is really the source of truth for all identifier definitions, and it defines usage and it provides examples. So this is all available from this hyperlink in AU Core, and AU Core and other downstream IGs really follow the principle of referencing that content rather than duplicating it manually in IGs. And also, if we did this, if we duplicated this manually, it really adds maintenance work, and it risks two IGs getting out of sync over time. And I think, as also mentioned previously, applying this change manually across many profiles in AU Core with identifier slices really adds maintenance work, and there's really no benefit to this. So for all of these reasons, it's really not persuasive to do this and to change the overall approach for this slice or other identifier slices in other AU Core profiles. So I think I'll stop here for any questions or comments.
Okay, thanks, Dushi.
Mhm.
So does anyone have any questions or comments or any other or anything that you'd like Dushi to go into in more detail? All right. Do you want to go to the JIRA issue, Dushi, to show
Yes.
the disposition, which I think is reflective of what you've just said?
Yes. Yeah.
Very,
I think
that
I've
looks
summarized. Yeah, I've summarized the proposed resolution.
okay.
Yeah. I'll just give a moment to everyone to go through it, and then I'll make a motion.
Right, we're just giving people
This,
another
Mhm.
minute to just read that, and then we'll call again for any comments or questions before we look to make a motion. And so I'll put up the call here. Are there any other comments or any questions that people have on this issue? All right, hearing none. Dushi, yes, you can make a motion.
All right. I would like to make a motion that this is resolved as not persuasive as per the resolution description in the JIRA ticket.
Okay, thank you, Dushi. Who would like to second that motion?
Marvin would second that.
Thank you, Marvin. I will now launch the electronic vote for the current motion. So as always, affirmative, negative, or abstain. Pop it in the chat. If you can't vote on the using the e-vote. All right, just one or two more people to vote. Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. With the vote in the chat, that makes that 18 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstain. The motion carries. We will record this as non-persuasive. Thanks, Dushi, and I agree with the comment in the chat that that was a comprehensive explanation. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I will stop sharing my screen now.
All right. I will go back to sharing in just a moment. I just want to check where we are time-wise. Okay. Yes, excellent. We are on time. Fantastic. Let me share screen. Okay. So let's talk about then wrap up of AU Core R2. So this is what we put in front of people, a lot of whom are on the call in January this year, where we talked about our timeframes. This is what we plan to do for AU Core R2 was to do a yearly update, to do a maintenance release after the massive work that we'd undertaken to get an R1 out the door, to basically trial this process, do a yearly update, and that meant that we would basically be doing TDG calls that was development between February and June, which gave us really only 8 online calls. We have stuck to that, but with the addition, which is in orange on the right there, that we had additional information session calls. So for each of the new profiles that we added in, we ran prior to the TDG vote, essentially, an information session to go through, and I think that was quite successful. We plan to do 2 face-to-face meetings around AU Core, and we have only done those 2 face-to-face meetings. The one in the February at Adelaide, which was part of the all-day workshop, which also looked at, I think, medications. And then in March at the Sydney Connectathon, there was the work group meeting day where we had our meeting. For Connectathons, we'd planned to bring AU Core through testing in March, August, and of course December is still coming up. So that's still the plan. We have done March and August. We are going to bring the normative R2 draft into December, so that's on track. We'd planned to have a June Spark testing event, and we did that. So that's done, and we have AFMM2 approval out of this for everything but healthcare service, which is why we've been talking about it around trying to put out a call or have some people come along to the December Connectathon who will test healthcare service. And we've gone through basically the ballot for working standard. We've done our reconciliation calls. So our next milestone is publishing January 2025. So we are on track. We have basically been following this pathway, which looks like this. And also has the tie-in of AUCDI. Our dependency is AUCDI R2. Well, this diagram doesn't have base on it because I can't fit all of them on. Base is the same time frames as core, so base that we depend on is wrapping things up now and is also planned to publish a day or two prior to AU Core R2. And I'm just going to do a quick recap of what we intended. So for AU Core R2, we intended to support downstream project priorities, basically, which at the time were patient summary and e-requesting. That's still the two HL7AU downstreams, but I think there's also been support there for other community activities, and certainly also healthcare service has come in support for Health Connect. We wanted to um, enhance AU CDI coverage. There's some data elements and one data group from AU CDI that we did not have coverage of in AU Core R1, so we wanted to increase that coverage. And basically, we wanted to refine through testing and implementation what was already in AU Core R1. That was the goal. So here's essentially what we kind of agreed on the scope was. We've got new profiles, 3 new profiles. We've now got coverage of medication use statement, and we enhanced a bunch of different profiles. These are all the profiles where we've made a change through AU Core R2. It's probably easier to see that in this visual, where the little pluses are where we've made a change throughout AU Core R2. So we've actually done a pretty good amount of work, actually. The changelog in AU Core will list the specifics and link off to the JIRAs on what change actually happened. But no, I think it's been a really successful kind of go through at um, testing out and then bringing through enhancements where we've noticed that we can and should make improvements into AU Core on a number of different profiles. And I think that we would want to continue that into R3. And so what that does at a macro level of AUCDI coverage, so AUCDI R2 as covered by AU Core R2, we now have coverage of all the core data groups. So AUCDI has data groups under different cases, core and patient summary and chronic condition management. The ones in dark orange are the core data groups, and we now have coverage of those. Reminder that we have not yet tackled last updated. And so that's on our backlog to consider whether or not we can tackle that in R3, whether or not this is the right time, basically, to be implementing that. So, next steps. Well, these are the same kind of steps we had to go through for AU Core R1. So here's where we are. One of the first steps, once you've got past ballot reconciliation, is to announce your withdrawal. That's already happened, so that's in progress. We want to finish off AFMM. So we can certainly publish AU Core Healthcare Service without being AFMM2. But ideally, we would like to have the confidence level of this. And I think our last planned testing event is the December Connectathon. So if you are coming and you do implement healthcare service, that would be fantastic if you can share the test results with us so that we can get an understanding of the coverage of what's in AU Core. One of the things we have to do, of course, is confirm if ballot has passed. That's grayed out because it's already done. AU Core has passed, so that's a tick. And then we go into publication preparation. That's going to make sure that every single change request that we've agreed on, every single technical correction is in there. We need to make sure that any of the cross IG editorial changes are in around, sometimes there's menus or headings or images, or other structural changes, or those kinds of things that happen at a HL7AU editorial level that come down from a publication perspective. I might actually pause there and ask a question that around, and I'll direct this to Brett or Ruben. We've had the, I guess, deferred issue around an updated licensing statement. Is that, can I get an update on that? Is that like something that will likely be in time to be incorporated in this publication.
Is that terminology related or
Yeah.
broader?
No, it's primarily, I think it's the stuff left from the third-party usage page, particularly NCTS, and
I would
what
like us
words
to
to
get that
use.
resolved for
Yep.
this snapshot thing. So yeah, I think let's commit to that. And if we run into any issues, we'll let you know, Danielle.
Okay, that would be great. So we're going for, so then talking about timings, we would freeze the AU Core content prior to January 22nd, because that's the date, the first meeting back in 2020. Oh, that says 2025. That is 2026. We are not time traveling. Let me just fix that. We need to have fully completed all changes and have a publication branch ready to go for the AU Core TDG call on the 22nd of January. So I think that is, I guess, putting in frame when we would need the content by.
Noted.
And so prior to that meeting, we'll bring in anything that's board directed, if that comes in, anything that comes from a HL7AU publication conventions perspective. AU Core itself will have an editorial review for someone to go through, and we'll make sure that everything is like lined up and all the headings are in the right like sentence or title case or however that works. There'll be a big QA review of all the parts using a lot of the IG Publisher automated tooling to check things. And then we'll prepare the publication branch to bring to this TDG call to run through and say, here it is, and let's just confirm the current list of errors and warnings are the list that we either already have accepted or we need to go through and accept. The current kind of set of errors or warnings, if there are any. And sometimes there are because the publication tool chain is constantly evolving, which is fantastic, but it also means it is a moving target on the kinds of warnings or things that can be thrown up. After this point on January 22nd, and assuming we either approve as is, or we make a conditional approval where we say, yes, we're happy for this to be published as long as you do this one thing. We would take this to the next firework group call, which would be on the 28th of January to ratify the decision that's been made, that it meets the prerequisite criteria that are defined on. Actually, this is available on the HL7AU Confluence site, what the criteria is. Once we've met all of that, have endorsement from the firework group, then we can publish. And so our target is still on the end of January. So with this approval and a publication branch ready to go, I would hope that we would publish pretty quickly, maybe the next day, maybe even same day, but that might be pushing it. But certainly by the end of January. So that's what we're going to do to finish this off. In the meantime, this also includes with technical corrections. So if you do spot something, you raise it. The IG editors will continue to monitor that to make sure that these are being addressed as this publication preparation goes on. Ooh. Okay, so that's how we're going to get from where we are now to publication of AU Core R2. Basically, from this point, the IG editors go away and do a bunch of work and bring it back to run through with this group for approval to publish, and then take it to the firework group for endorsement. Any questions? If anyone would like to volunteer to do editorial reviews or QA reviews, let me know. We will absolutely include you in it. All right, let's talk about AU Core R3 then. So now that we've basically done R2 and we're in publication preparation, that means it's time to consider AU Core R3. So I think one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is this a yearly update? Is this a maintenance release, which does scope the amount of work that we can undertake into um, basically 8 fortnightly calls, which is maybe 4 profiles, 4, 5 profiles, or a new actor capability statement and a couple of profiles? Um, or is there, um, do we want to go for a major release? I think at the moment, from the various chats I've had with people, is that we might start on the approach that this is a yearly update, but I'm certainly keeping my ear open for the work being undertaken by the agency on their digital health work program that might, I think, be something that we would look to incorporate in AU Core R3. And hopefully, I get an understanding then of whether or not a yearly release is appropriate, or if there is more work that we would want to undertake and have that be in R3 rather than wait again into an R4 time frame. Um, David.
Yeah, it's interesting because regardless, we want to incrementally extend ourselves, but we're doing it in a really controlled manner right now. So it seems like a pretty good pace.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, David. Heath?
So I just wanted to confirm you're talking about a bigger release. So the bigger
Yes.
release would be a longer time frame than 1 year. Is that what you're alluding to? So the 1 year is the small increments, and a bigger release or a major release is some time greater than a year.
Yeah, I didn't put it on here, but I think I have a slide on what that. No, I didn't. I was just thinking about it, which we posed this last time. If we go for a major release, we would probably be looking at an 18-month time frame rather than a 12-month time frame, with those additional 6 months being kind of used into development and further testing work.
So very quickly, I think it's a little bit probably early for us to say that, considering we've got the
Mm.
EOI process coming up in November. So I think we'll be in a better position when we get the feedback from the EOIs to actually sort of know the scope of what people want. And then I think we'll be in a better position perhaps in December or January to ask this question.
Agreed. And just before I go to Neil, I wasn't intending to like vote on this kind of thing today. It was more socializing. I think that
Yeah.
we can go down the 12-month path, or depending on what work is involved, and we'd actually have to look at the downstream projects as well that rely on core and their time frames as to how that would work for them if we decide we're going to go a major release, which might be an 18-month time frame instead of 12, or it might even be big enough to need a 2-year time frame again. Yeah, I think it depends on the amount of work and the amount of change that we want to put into a particular release. Neil?
Sorry, it might be slightly unrelated. And just from a implementer's point of view, what does R2 and R3 mean? Like if an implemented manages to be R1 compliant, and I think as David said, R2 is an incremental change. So being R1 compliant, does R2 then invalidate that? And then when we go to R3, and I guess a follow-up question is, which is likely to be initially adopted by the agency, or enforced in the future? Is it a safe bet to go for R1 first as an implementer, or?
I'll let someone from the agency answer that question. Who would like to take that?
I'm happy to jump in. Look, I think what I can say is we haven't landed on a position regarding that yet, and it's probably something we can discuss offline. I think, look, in theory, we will probably be trying to leverage whatever is the latest stable version that's available. But yeah, I think that's probably just a very generic principle. I think then it just comes down to when we're doing development work, just picking the right path for us. So I'm not probably saying too much right now, but I'd say as a principle, maybe the latest stable version that's available. But I'm probably sure there's going to be some exceptions to that. But I'd be happy to take that question offline if you wanna reach out.
Sure, thanks.
So Brett, and then I'll make a comment.
Yeah, I think we're kind of at the point where really, I mean, we've got some specs. You know, R2 is going to have a lot of FMM2 stuff in it, and I think it's time, you know, we should be really looking to see implementation, improve our maturity, and try and lock some of this stuff in the, you know, through implementation and looking at the FMM level improvements. We have to be aware of backwards compatibility. I mean, we can do an R3 and an R4, and if we're not doing anything backwards incompatible, like you're probably not going to have a problem. Yeah, so I think it's those things become more and more important as the maturity goes up. But I think really, like after R2, I mean, I think we're really looking at getting people to be able to do this stuff day in, day out and use it. So, and we should be looking at more at the FMM improvements than, you know, I think that's, you know, a primary goal.
Thanks, Brett. From my perspective, this is obviously all still to be worked through with the agency and the department, and I think that is coming. And from the point at which we have a kind of a shared agreement on what versions and what portions of specifications are going to go into that implementation pathway, I think that will mean that we should come back and also have a conversation in this group about how we're managing these specifications so that we have that tie-in around that, because there is going to have to be a strong relationship between things that are in policy and what particular versions, or around procurement requirements or any of those things once it actually gets used in anger, and we will need to manage that. That talking about, I guess, the current release is with, I think, reflecting on where we are, AU Core R1 was the first, you know, out the gate, and I think the enhancements we've made in AU Core R2 have been basically better versions of what is in AU Core R1 plus some extras. We'll have to have a look at what is even suggested for AU Core R3, and where that does line up with the agency's work plan and also the government's timeframes on those. So I think that is going to be a conversation that we are going to be having during the AU Core R3 period, but we don't have any definitive statements yet.
Thanks. So I guess from a simplistic point of view, this for implementer, we can't really be R2 compliant if we're not R1 compliant to begin with. So as a start, as a building block, like since that's the most published, and we have to start there anyway. Is that assumption correct, or?
I think so. I mean, it is the list of changes we made, besides adding in new profiles, is in the changelog. So I'm not actually sure it's necessarily a time-based relationship, like you compliant to R1 and before you were compliant to R2. The changes that have been made overall do include certain things around, we've added must support to elements. So there are some different expectations in AU Core R2 because we have added in those items. I think there's also some changes in terms of terminology, though this is only at preferred level, so that's not really, that's not backwards incompatible at all. I don't think there's anything that is really conflicting with R1. The biggest change would be if you were trying to be compliant to being an AU Core responder or requester. Every time we add a new profile, that means that if you were already using that resource, you now have profile obligations that you didn't have before. That's probably the biggest change between AU Core R1 and R2. So if you were already having a strong implementation in your view, there's a very high likelihood that that doesn't actually change what you already have.
Okay, thanks.
But I think as we go along, we have to pay closer and closer attention to, is it actually really critical for us to be making this change? Because we should be looking to, especially for the content now that's gone through 2 releases, is when can we provide that stability? Are we happy now? What is driving this change? Is it actually critical? Because it does have those flow-on effects to implementations, to compliance, but it also has those flow-on effects down to all the downstream specifications that pick this up. Sanjeet?
Daniel, probably a question for ADH, not for you. Being compliant, what benefit does a vendor get? The reason I'm asking this question is we are working on R2, R3. It means we would have to work on those profiles if you have to be ready for connectathons, and we'll have to work on conformance as well. It's a decent chunk of effort. Which is why I'm asking, what benefit do we get? Do we bunch all of them together from a vendor point of view, do all the conformance together later, or do we go release by release?
Ricardo, did you want to address that?
I probably don't have much I can offer, Sanjeev, from my perspective to this one. I think again, this is probably something I can take back and just chat to our team in Connected Care. So it's probably not something that I can really probably comment on this call. But I'll pass that question on to some of my colleagues who might be able to probably answer that a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm asking is we have our roadmaps and our backlogs, and there's only enough capacity we can allocate to activities, and yeah, it's about balancing from a vendor point of view.
Yeah, look, I think one thing that I could probably say from my end is as soon as we started to put out specifications against a specific release, any changes will need to for sure factor into consideration what you just said there. What would be the impact of us kind of moving forward in release once we have something that's been published and that's been put to use in production. So I think at this stage, until we kind of have something in production that we can use after the whole modernization journey is completed, I think it's all very theoretical for us. But I'm pretty sure that as soon as something is baselined, any changes to it will definitely need to factor in the impacts to the wider community that might be integrating with us. So that it's not something that I'd say will just happen without us putting some thinking into it. So I think I can say that, but I think that details on how we might do that, we probably haven't. I don't think I have a position I can put out just right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks both. Heath?
No problem.
But is it reasonable to assume, Ricardo, that you're attempting to, and you don't have to commit to this, that you're building on what we have in AU Core? So if someone had an AU Core compliant system based on a particular release, that they would be closer to what might be released as specific implementation guides for the modernization projects going forward. Is that a reasonable assumption?
We have a public commitment on our interoperability plan that our solutions that we build in the agency, they are built against AU Core and AU Base as much as possible. So I think at a high level, it's for sure a commitment that we've made publicly, and that we're in fact already applying to some of the work that's happening right now. I think that's out there, and that's certainly something that we will.
And I mean, I guess like any of our AU IGs as well, there's always going to be some sort of statement if you deviate from that as well. So at least it's going to be easy to understand where there is a variance if there is one. So
Look, and I guess no, that's a fair assumption, and I think if we have to, then we'll have to work through that. But also, I think just calling out the fact that we're committed to also get our specifications through the FIRE community process. So I think it's also an opportunity for us to engage with the community a bit more broadly, and I think just address those things as they kind of coming up. So I think I'm hoping things will be a lot more transparent in this space as we start to deploy production ready solutions.
But I mean, just going more widely and back to you, Sanjita, I mean, interoperability is basically the benefit and the ability to work with other vendors, whether it's the national infrastructure or a potential partner that you don't know about again. That's the benefit of having something to start with. That's relatively close, in my opinion.
Yep, I get it, but again, there's a significant dollar value attached to this work from a vendor point of view. So
there's also significant benefit as well.
Which is what I'm asking, what benefit are we looking at by being compliant?
But that's, a level of perception, I guess, from every individual.
All right. Thanks for everyone for that discussion. And I think that unless in terms of AU Core R3, and certainly that's what I've seen through some of the community submissions, which would be similar to R2, is that there's a lot of interest in extending the coverage of AU Core. Basically, resource profiles we don't yet have, which there's quite a lot that we don't yet have coverage for that people would like an agreement on that they can build to and share with other systems. So that's what I'm seeing coming from the community requests primarily. There's a couple of other things that are more interesting that will be pitched. And I think then the other question that we are all really interested in and can't wait to hear from you, Ricardo, about where is the agency going and that work program, and how can we ensure that we've got the right things in the HL7AU specifications to support that modernized kind of ecosystem.
Yep, that's something we're working on at the moment, and I think it's probably not going to be me who will be sharing that, but I think it will be shared a bit more widely, also as part of some of the work that the department is doing in this space in capturing a roadmap of activities. So I think this will be coming out in the near future.
Ooh, will we get an update at the November TDG day is that a possibility?
Yeah, look, I think it might not. Again, I can take that offline and just liaise with the colleagues in the department. I think it's probably a kind of a multi-stakeholder discussion. I just don't know if I can commit to that, which I probably can't.
Okay. Thanks, Ricardo. Any other questions that people wanted to have around, I guess what is really kind of the wider sort of context and work program that AU Core and other projects are sitting within?
I haven't heard much about AU CDI R3 because I know they've been through a
Yeah.
process to do their scope. Do we assume all of those things are potentially in scope for AU Core R3?
No, we do not assume they're all potentially in scope for AU Core R3, because a number of some of the work that's coming through, and Nairi, you could probably handle this better than I'm going to, is tagged for specific use cases rather than being tagged as an addition to what is considered the core part of AU CDI. Is Nairi still on the line? No, Nari's had to drop off. We should have asked that question earlier. Oh well. But AUCDI will get an update from the AUCDI folks, and I think we've already received one in the CDG around the plan for R3, which hasn't tasked any items into core. What they're focused on is working through a couple of additional use cases to add in, and then I think looking to through and I have to confirm this with Kylin, either through the draft for comment or through a workshop, understand the community requirements for, I'm going to call it promoting use case elements or data groups to the core part of AUCDI. But I'm not aware of any specific data groups or elements that are currently planned in AUCDI R3. I think that if depending on what we will be working on in R3, if because some of the profiles in AU Core aren't in the core part of AUCDI, they're in other parts, and that could still be something that gets worked through. And there's also, I think, the case where there are submissions into AU Core that don't yet have an AU CDI model, and that's going to need to be managed with the CDG group on whether we can proceed safely with an engagement back to the CDG, or whether or not we need to say to put that in the AU Core backlog, and it can't proceed without the AU CDI modeling of that first. So those things I think are going to come up as we go through R3. All right. So that's sort of the graphical of what it might look like. And this time I have put AU base on the slide. AU base is also tagged to be probably a yearly. So it looks at the same time frames again, if that's what we end up going down the pathway. But that's all up to you folks as to whether or not that's actually what we do. Same process. Okay. I'll just kind of wrap up the AU Core R3 conversation. So, in terms of getting started, we've got major stuff and enhancements. Major stuff tends to come through, and I guess we've asked for it to come through the November workshop in Canberra, where there's community pitchers who are pitching the big things that they want and why. If you will be there and you will be pitching, I think please make clear in your pitch that this is applicable across multiple use cases and that there is already a community, or you can bring them with you to make the decisions. because if we're going to be talking about meds, we need meds vendors to be able to have that conversation. If we're going to be talking about diagnostic reporting, we need reporting people in the call. We need to make sure that whatever we're working on, we've got the right people in the room to be able to make the decisions and that we can actually test this out. So anything that also gets pitched, we need enough people who are actually building this now or who have already built it and tested it to be able to put this into AU Core. Otherwise, it's not ready for a release. So that's what we're going to go through for some of the major calls. We've got Jan Feb to also continue the scoping conversation in online TDG calls. And then throughout the whole of the development cycle, we'll do what we've done last time with enhancements, where people will submit an enhancement they want. Maybe it's a change to an existing profile. Maybe it is a new profile, and we'll just put that on the agenda and make some decisions about that as we go through. This is more guidelines on how to do that, depending on whether or not, if you're a downstream IG and you want to promote your content into Core, then you create a JIRA issue, email a co-chair to get it on the agenda, and then that will get spoken to. We'll get you to speak to that at a TDG call on what the proposal is so that we can make some decisions and go through on next steps. If you are not a downstream project, but you have something that you want changed. Maybe it's big, maybe it's small, maybe it's terminology, maybe it's search parameters, maybe you think the conformance requirements are unclear, maybe we need a guidance page. You can first probably post in Zulip. That's probably the easiest and quickest way to get a discussion going on this thing, how many other people are interested in this, and then we can raise a JIRA issue from that and bring that into a TDG. If there's enough interest to say, yes, let's actually go ahead and work on this. All right. That's all I wanted to say about AU Core R3 because it's just early steps. We don't need the slide because we're done that bit. All right, here's what's next. So our next get together is that Spark TDG face-to-face workshop in Canberra, where we'll be going through the AU Core R3 backlog pitches that have come from the community, and we're going to do some patient summary workshops. After that, we've got our online call in November, which is the 27th. I think there's one issue that's been raised on AU Core, like we did today. We could go through and make a decision on it. The agenda for that one is going to be the report back of the face-to-face workshop. It'll also go through that change request and look at preparing for the Connectathon. Then we've got the Connectathon in Melbourne, where we will have that normative snapshot for AU Core R2, and we'll go through and test that. And then here's what I wanted to raise today. There is an 11th of December meeting. So that's basically the next day after the Connectathon. I think we've got two options. We either cancel that meeting or we move it to the next week. Since e-requesting has calls on that week and so does the firework group and a few others, we wouldn't be able to retain our same time. We would need to move to a Tuesday. I think that we should probably just cancel the meeting. But I'll ask for thoughts. Does anyone want to retain that meeting?
I propose we cancel it. Marvin.
Oh, okay. We've got a motion. Does anyone want to second that?
A second.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I will relaunch that poll. Okay. Please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain for cancelling the meeting on the 11th of December. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. Okay, with what's in the chat, we have 17 affirmative, 1 negative, 1 abstain. Can I ask the negative voter what was the agenda item, or what they wanted to discuss in that call? Because we might be able to move it to another call to make sure that that's covered.
I just love our company, Danielle.
I mean, we are pretty fabulous, that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
But all right, that motion is passed. We will cancel the meeting. If there are any things that you want to have discussed, we can put it on the 27th of November, or our first call back is on the 22nd of January. So we're basically going to go from pre-connectathon to, okay, let's publish. That's the time gap there that we're going to have. And then we'll go into some conversations around scoping from R3. And that will be, of course, heavily informed from the community pitches. And I think we'll also do a number of online workshops with folks around what you want to have progressed in AU Core R3. All right, that's the plan. I think with 6 minutes left, just quick covering off the high-level agenda for the CDG day, sorry, TDG day in Canberra. There's a CDG the day before. 8:30 is a registration for those of you who haven't already registered in the CDG day. 9 o'clock will kick off, as we usually do with welcome and introductions, and there'll be an update on the status of the projects. Then we're going to do an AU patient summary workshop. Graham is going to run a patient summary workshop around functional limitations of receiving an IPS that doesn't conform to the national standard, aka Australian patient summary. And then after morning tea, there will be a workshop that Heath is running on hot topics. There's a Zulip poll on that to understand what people are interested in. So that'll be Heath plus, I think there might be 1 or 2 people presenting. After lunch is when we go through the AU Core R3 backlog pitches. Marvin will be running that session, and there will be a bunch of the different presenters who will be standing up and speaking to that. There are 7 different pitches that will be made. And there'll also be a bit of a backlog prioritization that will include the community pitch, but also the opportunity to say, I actually want this part of the backlog. The last workshop of the day is still to be confirmed. I'm waiting on a response from the agency, and I'm also waiting on a response from the CDG as to what we will be putting in that final workshop. So fortunately, I can't confirm that at the moment. Does anyone have any questions about this day? All right. And then our next online call, 27th of November. We'll do the report back and any change requests. Okay, does anyone have anything that they want to add onto the 27th of November call at this point? All right, not hearing any. I think I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you everyone for your time again today.
Can I just, I'm about to put in a link if anyone wants to add any additional hot items to the AUPS session. That would be of interest. So just before you drop off, if you're interested in doing that, grab the link that I just put in.
Sounds great. Thanks, Heath. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.